All right, and joining me today is Aiemann Zahabi, who fights Aori Qileng at UFC 289. That fight is on June 10th. So, I wanted to start here. It's been 11 months since we saw that big win over Ricky Tercios. What's kind of been going on in this layoff? I know you've had some layoffs before, and they're not your favorite thing in the world. So, what's been up in this 11 months?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been having a hard time getting matchups. I don't know how the whole system works exactly. So we're looking for a manager this time, and we settled with Daniel Rubenstein. So now I signed with him, and this is gonna be our first fight together. And then hopefully after this one, he'll be able to get me a second one without taking a year. And I was just actually talking with my buddy Arnold Allen, who also fights in the UFC, and I was telling him like, man, it's crazy. He had 10 wins in a row before his last fight, and he also fought like once a year, which is insane. But just that's sometimes how the cookie crumbles, man. I have no idea how it works.
And was the reluctance to have a manager just like you didn't want anybody else dealing with your business? Was it you just never thought you felt like you needed one? What was the reason
I
to
mean,
always be on your own?
Frost was basically really my manager. It's hard for it, like not hard for him, but like, it's nice for him. I like that he's in charge most of the time. And if ever we're working with anybody in the end, Frost was making all the decisions. So I never really thought we needed a manager, really. And then I had signed with some friends, like some friends of ours that used to work with the GSP, of course. And it was really just for us doing a lot of the stuff, and they would help with paperwork. So like, I don't know, we weren't getting a lot of matchups. So now I decided, you know what, we need someone who's got a lot of experience getting a lot of good matchups. And I know he's worked with Sean O'Malley and some other big names in the UFC before Danny. So I'm hoping that it works out.
And was it a pretty quick signing right after you got Danny on your side? Was it like, like you signed it on the dotted line with him and soon enough you had Aori's name in front of you?
No, it wasn't that quick, but it was soon after. Soon after. And my last management team, they were great also. Like Phil was amazing, Hodolf, they're great guys. Just that, ended up being for us making a lot of the decisions. So we went separate ways after a while, but that's all good. We left amicably. They were great to me.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. Now, you mentioned this is not the first time you've had big gaps, and it's been a little bit frustrating in the past. What do you find yourself doing in these 11 months? Are you honing certain skills? Or I know you've traveled a little bit too to be teaching other places. Like what has been the biggest use of your time in this 11 months?
It's always trying to get better. Always for us is always looking for the next big thing, the next thing that we need that's going to give me an edge, and give the whole team an edge. So we're always working on the most, up to date jujitsu stuff, up to date wrestling, up to date striking. We're always trying to find what's the cutting edge, what's the leading stuff, and what part of that stuff I can put into my game. So we're always adding pieces to the game. Like I don't know if somebody like really watches like all my fights in the UFC, even the fights from before to now. Like I change every single year. Like I find it like I'm harder to predict in that sense. Whereas like let's say like my opponent Eric Qileng, him too is actually hard to dial in. He has 31 fights, but in his 4 fights in the UFC, he fought a little bit different every time. So that's interesting too. Whereas you think if someone has 30 fights, they do this style. Like a Khabib, you know what he's gonna do. GSP, you know what he's doing in there, and he's gonna do it anyway. I'm not there yet. Right now, I'm still like trying to progress and make my game better every time.
I like that. I like that. Now, you've mentioned your brother a couple of times, and now I'm very clear that you're doing a lot of game planning in your own right. What's that look like with your brother and you, game planning for an opponent, watching film? Is it something you guys do together? Is it something you do separately?
We do it separately, actually. We do it separately. And then it's nice because he watches it, I watch tape. And then like when we talk about the fight, I don't always see what he sees and he doesn't always see what I see. And then the things that we both noticed, like, okay, those are like probably very obvious. We have to put them on top of the priority list, and then we work on the finer things and see. But things have changed a lot in terms of game planning. Like before, we used to really want to stick to a rigid game plan. And now we have a general idea of what I want to do, but knowing that he may show up and be different. So like now we always leave that open ended. Like instead of being like a math test where we have to have the perfect formula and it's got to be like this and stick to the game plan no matter what happens. Because what happened with Ricky for me was I expected a totally different Ricky. I expected him to step in, throw nonstop, walk me down. have no fear to be taken down. Like just like just go barn burner fight. And instead, he came. He was avoiding my right hand like crazy. He was slipping. He looked like Bobby Green in there almost. Like he was doing a really good job defensively. Whereas in his the fights coming up to that one, he didn't do a great job defensively in the striking. He mostly was like willing to trade. So I was expecting that, and I kind of like threw me off too bad. But I had to figure out how to win the fight in the moment, right? So then we said, you know what, we need to add that factor of like, okay, we're going to prepare, but not be too rigid that you can't be flexible mentally in there to change it up.
I love that. Now, would you say that game plan mentality and that loose game plan mentality comes entirely from the Ricky Tercios fight, or was there something else that triggered it too? Like, did Ricky Tercios just pretty much change the way you prepare for fighters?
No, not just him, but like we're seeing it with everyone on our team, and especially with like the younger guys, let's say like in the amateur team, when a guy has 2, 3 fights, that's what I was trying to say before. Like, if a guy has a couple of fights, you don't know what he's going to show up and do. He might change completely. Okay, he moved team, he did this. Now all of a sudden he's obsessed with wrestling because he lost by wrestling. So all of a sudden you can't take him down after 6 months. What the hell is going on? So we've noticed it as a team too for a lot of our guys. And there has to be a flexibility of mind in there.
I dig that. Now, let's talk about this fight. Before we talk about Qileng Aori a little bit too, I want to talk about your chance to fight in Canada because, it's been a long ass time since the UFC has come back to Canada, and, maybe it's not in your backyard. It's a little ways away here, but you're still getting to fight in the homeland again. What was it like knowing the UFC was coming back to Canada and they wanted your name on that card?
I was super excited. It's been a long time. I know it's been like 4 years, 5 years. I don't even know. And I'm happy to represent Canada. I grew up here, born and raised here. I love Canada. Canadians are fantastic people, and it's just a great way to represent the country. I'm gonna write that I'm wearing them with me in the cage.
Absolutely. And too, there's so many fights happening in the Apex right now. Obviously, there's not a lot of fights that are traveling around that are, definitely not outside of the country, but even within the United States, they're not traveling around much. Is the big crowd a thing for you? Do you care about that? Do you not care about that? I know some fighters are real picky.
For me, it doesn't change anything. I love the Apex, man. Like the experience of fighting in the Apex, it's the best. You know why? Because it was made for us. It's curated A to Z. All the UFC staffs are there. The UFC staff's amazing. They own the hotels. They have the kitchen guys. They have the guys who make the food. They have everything you need. There's no doubt if something goes wrong fight week, they have every solution, which is nice. But fighting in front of a crowd is great for sure. I mean, I love fighting in front of a crowd, but I'm not gonna get intimidated by there. I remember like when Ricky was yelling and screaming to the crowd, "Give me energy!" Blah blah. In my mind, it's just like, man, the crowd isn't fighting for you. Nobody can fight for you. You gotta come here and take it, man. You gotta take it from me. So I just focus on the guy and I just try to win that fight.
So with your druthers, with the exception of getting the chance to represent Canada in Canada, if it were up to you, you would fight in the Apex every time.
Every time, man. I love the Apex. Apex is perfect.
I love it. You're one of the only fighters I've ever heard say that. So let's talk about the fight with Qileng Aori. You mentioned he's on a 2-fight winning streak. He's on a good run for himself. He's done a lot of that work on his feet, but like you said, he changes himself up here and there.
Yeah.
So what have you been doing particularly, without giving away too much, to prepare for what you see from Qileng Aori?
Listen, I'm prepared for 15 minutes of hell with this guy. I know he just changed it up a little bit, but something I noticed is that when the fight gets hard, or if it's not necessarily going his way, he walks you down, man, and he just fires himself up and he goes into trade. Kind of like what I was expecting from Ricky here. So I prepared similarly in a way, but I've also left that open-ended question because earlier in his first 2 fights at 125, I feel like he used footwork much better, and he was in and out a lot. Whereas when he went up to 135, he was really trying to stalk guys and walk them down. So prepared for both, but expecting if the fight gets hard for him, or if I get him starting to get an advantage, he's going to be like a bull in a china shop, and I got to be a matador.
I dig that. Now you mentioned, that's how you prepared for Ricky. You're leaving it a little bit more open this time, but that's basically how you're preparing for Qileng here.
Yeah.
Is that the type of fighter you prefer to fight? Do you want a guy to bite down on the mouthpiece and get in your face?
I want a guy that I know what he's gonna do in there. That's what I want. You know what I mean? I mean, it's hard to fight something when you don't know what to expect. right?
Mm.
That's the real test, man. That's a test, you know. So now that's why we're trying to like develop that mentality where eventually it shouldn't matter who you fight, right? Eventually you should have plugged so many weaknesses in your game that you can go in there and fight anybody, right? And that your game plan beats their game plan, or your fight style, your fight strengths beat their strengths. That's it. You know, like GSP, like the dream would be to be a GSP, right? To be so dominant that everybody knows he's shooting. Like, I mean, how do you not know? You know, and you know, like for me, I really like that fight. You know, Mirab and Peter Yan too. It was a crazy fight because you know Mirab is gonna shoot, man. We all know, but he does it,
Yeah.
and he does it again, and then again. And it's like that's cool. You know, that's really really cool.
Absolutely. Now, I almost feel silly asking this, but I always ask it to every fighter before I let them go, and that's for a prediction. So, you're keeping things
Yeah,
loose. You're trying not to give predictions, basically. But here I am.
yeah.
I'm going to ask you anyway. How do you see this one ended, June
Yes,
10th?
my favorite way to win is knockout. That's for sure. You know, and I would love to knock him out, but I'm not banking on it. I'm not banking on it. I'm prepared to go 15 minutes because he's a tough boy. I don't think he's ever been KO'd. And the fight against Jeff Molina, it came real close. And I'm hoping I hit harder than Jeff, and maybe I'll put him away.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. This is Aiemann Zahabi, who fights Aori Qileng at UFC 289 on June 10th. And Aiemann, thank you so much for the time, man. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.